Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome to Scott's Synth Stuff. We're continuing to work on the Korg Polysix. Today we're going to start off with the Keybed. Coming up next. As I mentioned on a previous video, I had a look at this Keybed and it's in pretty decent condition. It doesn't really need much done to it. In fact, it may even work perfectly. I just don't know. However, one of the most common problems with these is the circuit board contacts and the rubber carbon contacts. They do wear out. They get dirty, dusty, greasy, and that causes some of the keys to not work quite as well. I don't think we need to take this whole Keybed apart, which is nice because that's really a kind of not a fun job, because you have to take each individual key out one by one, and the way it's done on each Keybed is a little bit different. Now, if we had to work with the felts that are on here, which are what gives it the feel, so when you push down, it's not hitting a piece of metal, it's actually hitting felt, and that's why it gives you that soft kind of landing cushion, because if you hit that and it was metal, your hands would get pretty sore. There's a second felt for the key up. It's the key up felt so that it doesn't also hit metal on the way back up. But the felts in this are in really good shape. So all we're gonna do, I think, is take the circuit board off, clean it, and then I've ordered a new set of rubber contacts for this. So we're gonna take the old ones off, put the new ones on, put it back together, and I think we'll call this good. So this circuit board is held against the back of this Keybed, and so that when the keys come up, they can push the contacts. I'm going to remove these screws so that we can remove the circuit board and get a better view of exactly how it all works. And I must say, these screws are very loose. I don't know if that's supposed to be the case for these, or if there's something with this individual Keybed that these have just come loose over the years, but we will have a look and see. They're not supposed to be loose like that. They must have happened over a number of years. In fact, because those screws were so loose is why all those plastic contacts were so loose and falling off in the previous video. That should not be happening. If those screws are tight, those plastic spacers will be nice and tight and won't fall out. Now, these screws are not even finger tight. They've definitely come loose over the years, so we'll put them back a little tighter when we reassemble it. And there is our contact strip. So as you can see, when you press a key, this little piece of plastic pushes through here, and that pushes on each of these little rubber contacts. And if we have a look at a new one of these, you can see the rubber contact has black conductive carbon. So there's a conductive surface on there that is painted onto the silicone rubber. So let's pull one of these off. Now these are going to be discarded, so I'm not going to be too gentle pulling them out, but it gives you the idea. Here you can see the gold-plated contacts that the rubber contacts on the silicone portions connect to. So as you can see, they're basically just a switch. So when you push this down, this rubber contact pushes down and connects the two parts of this little switch together. By pushing that switch down, the synthesizer sees that the key has been pressed and it knows to sound the note. Now this is a very simple, non-velocity sensitive keyboard. All it knows is that you've pressed a key, and it knows when you've pushed it down, it knows when you've lifted it up. It doesn't know how hard you've hit the key. So we're going to remove all of these rubber contacts here. Now these contacts may be good, they may not be good. We don't really know, but I'm going to replace them because they are available. For the longest time, these were not available anywhere, and when they wore out, you were just out of luck. You had to maybe buy another keyboard that had the same Keybed and try to swap it in. But a lot of manufacturers have realized there is a market for these ancient contacts, and have started manufacturing them again. Up until then, sometimes the carbon contacts on these rubber contacts actually wore out. So there is actually a paint that you can get. I believe it's called a K-coat. And I'll put a link to it in the description below. And what you can do is use the K-coat to actually paint on a new carbon surface on here for the one that's been worn away. As for these contacts, they're actually gold plated. They can get dirty. I do see a little bit of liquid damage on that one, but for the most part, they look relatively clean. But I'm just going to clean those, and then we'll put in the new contacts. I'm going to clean them with some isopropyl alcohol. I am not going to get the isopropyl alcohol anywhere near these because it will actually melt the rubber that these are made from, and they will not work anymore. So we will move these far away so they don't get hit by any overspray. And then we'll just do a quick spray. And with a lint-free towel, a wipe to clean any dirt that might be on there. And there is actually quite a bit of dirt. We may end up doing this twice. I can see a lot of dirt and dust coming off. Now we don't want to touch this with your fingers once you've cleaned and sprayed it and cleaned it, because you don't want any oils from your fingers getting onto this. And we're going to just allow that to sit and evaporate and dry off on its own. And once it's fully dry with none of this isopropyl alcohol left, then we'll put the new contacts in. I use this pure anhydrous isopropyl alcohol. Basically, it's pure isopropyl alcohol, no water, no filler. I'll put a link to this in the description. This is really good for this type of cleaning. So while that is set aside waiting to dry, let's have a look at the keybed itself, which is pretty filthy. If you have a look, I don't know if you can see on camera, but there's a lot of grime and dirt on there, and it's not something that you just wipe off. It's really dirt right on the keys. And what I use to clean this is pretty unconventional. As some of you may know, I have a motorcycle channel dedicated to the care and feeding and repair of Goldwings. If you care to look, just do a search for Goldwing docs. For motorcycles, Honda makes this incredible cleaner, and I know Honda, it's called Pro Honda Spray Heat Cleaner and Polish. Honda makes it, it's intended for Honda motorcycles, but if you go into bike shops pretty much anywhere in the US, they're all using this stuff. So if you go into the Suzuki shop, they've got this stuff in there to clean the motorcycles. And why this is great is because you can spray it on a dirty bike and just wipe it off, and the bike is clean, and it leaves behind a protective, not like a wax, but a coating that sheds water and keeps it shiny and clean. That said, I've used this on everything. You can put it on plastic, metal, glass, plexiglass, chrome, you name it. It won't damage anything. It says right here, use on plastic, chrome, paint, aluminum. It says detailer in a can, and that's really what it is. It will get rid of anything. So if I just spray this on here like this, now we can just let that sit for a moment or two, and then all we have to do is just wipe it off with a clean towel, and all that grime and filth will just come right off of this keyboard. Look at that, it's like magic. So there you go, that's my secret weapon. I'll put a link to this in the description below. If you want to clean your motorcycle or your car or your synthesizer, this stuff really does the trick. As you can see, this keyboard has gone from literally from filthy and grimy to looking brand new and shiny. I also use this on the outer painted cases of the synthesizers as well. Although you got to be a little careful. You don't want to get it into switches or contacts or anything of that sort. Nothing electrical. So either cover it up, or what I do is I'll spray it onto a towel and just wipe the case of the synthesizer until all the filth comes off. All right, so now that I've let you in on my secret weapon for cleaning keybeds, let's reassemble this with the new contacts. This can get a little tricky if you look at these contacts, and again, you don't want to touch these with your fingers, you don't want to get any oil on them, but if you look, they actually have a little kind of a nub that you have to push through to fasten them in place. And just by pushing it with your fingertip, it goes right in. For the Polysix, you will notice that they are all identical except for one, which is a little bit longer, and that one goes down at the end. So we'll just set that one aside for the moment. If, like on these ones, you have a couple where they're tough to get, you can just pull them through gently from the other side. You should examine all the nubs that you've pushed through just to make sure that they've actually all gone completely through. All right, interestingly, I did order a full set for a Polysix, and they gave me an extra one of these. So I don't know if that's because they miscounted, or maybe they gave an extra one just in case one was bad, but so be it. We've now got a full set of new rubber contacts on this circuit board. Now we can reinstall it onto the keybed frame. You're going to make sure each of those rubber nubs fits properly through the hole and is not pinched against the edge. And then we can begin screwing the contact strip back into place. And whereas these screws were screwed in only really finger tight and they were almost falling out on their own previously, now I'm going to put them in quite firm and tight so that they are not going to come out. All right, and now our Korg Polysix keybed is good as new. No, it's not. I forgot to put the little plastic spacers back in there. Let's just pretend I did that, because when I did do it, I actually didn't have the camera running. So you do have to put those plastic spacers in there and then screw it down, because the screw tension is what holds those plastic spacers in place. Back to the video. All right, the next step is to pull the panels out of this case top. In order to do that, we need to pull all these knobs off. These knobs just pull off. They're just plastic knobs. The posts onto which they seat have a little split. So if the knobs are a little bit loose, you can take a screwdriver, just a flat blade screwdriver in there, and very gently just pry those two halves apart. Don't do it too much because they will crack and break. So I say very, very gently, just pry those apart, and it will tighten up the shaft in those knobs so that the knobs don't fall off anymore. Unlike most modern synths where the pots just stick through and they're kind of wiggly, the pots used back in the 1980s actually have nuts that fasten them directly on the panel, so that's why they're so solid, and that's why the pots on modern synths feel so cheap and wiggly. When you take these off, do use a socket. Don't try to take a pair of needle nose or something like that and try to jimmy off these little nuts, because it will slip and you'll end up scratching the face of your synthesizer and it'll look like crap, so don't do it. Use a proper, these are 11mm nuts. Just use a proper socket to remove them, and protect the finish of your synthesizer. You may want to keep the nuts that fasten the switches, such as the mode, the attenuator, octave, and waveform, because they are 13 millimeter rather than they're 12 millimeter rather than 11. All the others are 11. And once those are removed, we can then just remove these screws that hold the panels into the front panel. So now you can see all these circuit boards have been freed. If we remove the Korg bread ties, and cable restraints, and we do have a connector here to undo. More bread ties. I don't know that I'm going to be reusing these. I think I'm going to change these to nylon cable ties rather than these little pieces of wire. All right, so here's the switch board that we are going to be replacing all the different tactile switches. And then here's our potentiometer boards. And all we're going to do on these is just spray and clean out all these switches and potentiometers. Likewise, on these jacks on the back, we'll be spraying those out. So on the KLM 371 board, which is this switchboard, and it is nasty. I did spray this with isopropyl alcohol, and it took all the gunge and everything and pooled it up. So I'm going to have to respray this again. However, so I did take a picture of these buttons because you'll see they're different colors, and we want to make sure that the button caps go back into the same place. All right, so I've got some replacement buttons for the Polysix that came from, is this, I think, Mouser? Well, there's where they came from. The Omron switches. If I remember correctly, to remove each of these, because there is an LED as part of the button keycap, the cap and the surrounding plastic friction fits around the button. However, the LED is actually an integral part of it, so we have to desolder the button and the LED. So we're going to use the solder pump to desolder all of those. With any luck, we should be able then just to pull that up and off. Yep, it just pops right off. Looks like it's a friction fit. So there's the keycap that contains the LED, and then what's left behind is the button, and that then just gets pulled out. There's the original button. And I will make sure that the replacement actually does fit, and it looks like it does. Okay, perfect. Okay, maybe I'll do these one at a time rather than all at once, and that way I don't lose track of which color keycap goes where. I think that's a great idea. So we'll push that back in there. Let me start up my soldering iron so it's nice and hot. And you can see the LED inside there, how it's actually captured, which is why you have to desolder this LED in order to actually remove that switch, the keycap. So then we just push that down around the new switch, making sure the LED leads go into their holes. And it's a friction fit around that switch. There we go. Perfect. You know, I don't even need to solder those right away. I could just replace them and then solder them all at once. And I think that's what I'll do, rather than trying to do one at a time. And that way I don't end up with a hot soldering iron in my lap. All right, so let's desolder all the switches, and then I'll pull them out and replace them one at a time. And then we'll solder them all back together, like an assembly line. Desoldering pump commence. All right, like I predicted, I didn't end up with it in my lap. However, my solder pump plugged up and I needed to clear it out. And when I was putting it back together, I put my finger right onto this part here, which is set to 842 degrees Fahrenheit. And yeah, I'm going to feel that in the morning. So let's get back to it here. Alright, the new switches are all in. They all function. I only burned myself once. Next, we'll clean these switches in that pot, and then we'll start on the modifications for the Kiwisix. So to clean the switches, we'll be using Deoxit D5, which is the best contact cleaner I've ever used. I will leave a link to this in the description below. To clean all the potentiometers, we'll be using Deoxit Fader F5. It says for conductive plastic faders and controls, it works on all potentiometers, especially faders, you know, sliders like on mixers. It works really well on those. But for this, we will clean these switch contacts. Obviously, we don't need to clean these switches that we just replaced. And then we will clean this potentiometer. For potentiometers, you really want to get it up under those legs. There's a little gap between where the legs go into the body. You can see that little gap right there. That's where you want to get the spray nozzle. There we go. And then just work the potentiometer. Clean it all out. All right, so this one is pretty much good to go. We'll get rid of all these old 30-year-old, 40-year-old tactile switches that we don't need anymore. Into the bin. I did order a few extra just in case we screwed up. We didn't, so we don't need these extra ones. I'll just put them in the bag for now. You never know when we might need some again in the future. I'll put these in a bag and just mark them as being for the Polysix. And before we start the Kiwisix modifications, let's clean all the switches and pots on the KLM 369 and 370 boards. Keep in mind, some of these are switches as well. These are rotary switches here, so we don't want to use potentiometer cleaner on those. We want to use contact cleaner. The Kiwisix installation is not really plug and play because there are some modifications we have to do to the board in order to make it MIDI compatible, because things like the pitch bend and other features of the Polysix that are intended to be controlled by potentiometers, there is no way to control those with the processor, so we have to add some wires and make some modifications in order to make that possible. The first thing we have to do is remove these resistor here. We have R18, so there's R18, jumper 4, and R16. So those three components we are going to remove. The next thing we're going to do is on IC2. We have to cut some traces rather, and according to the instructions, we need to cut the traces for the -5 on pin 2 and -5 on pin 4. So that means we have to cut this trace right here and this trace right here. So this is the -5 rail right there, so we're just going to cut that trace. There and there. This is tough to do in here because it's very hard to see. Just make sure it's truly cut. So to ensure that we have in fact cut these traces, we're going to test between these two. That's good. No continuity. And we'll also check between this one and this one. No continuity. And we'll double check that we have continuity still there, that we didn't do any damage. So perfect. Those traces are now cut. All right, next we need to add a jumper between pins 3 and 6 on connector 9 here. So I'm just going to add just a little bit extra solder on pins 3 and 6. And then we can add this little jumper. So there's one end on 3, and Kiwisix or Kiwisix includes this little wire that allow you to do this. So there's our first jumper installed. So we have 2 longer wires, and those are going to go onto these traces that we cut. So these 2 pins where we cut the traces, we need, because we've cut those traces, we need to feed it with something, and that something's going to come from the Kiwisix board. So we need to add 2 little jumpers here, one on pin 4 and one on pin 2. So the pin 2 with that red wire is going to go to where our R16 used to be. Right there. So let's put a little solder blob there so we have something to tack onto. And then this wire can go on there. That is not, I'm not happy with that. Here we go. And the other one goes on to the same place on R18 that we've removed. Just to recap, so we have a jumper from pin 3 to pin 6 on connector 9. We have a jumper that runs from pin 2 that we cut the trace on IC2 that goes over to the left side of R16 here. And then we have another wire which runs from pin 4 to the left side of R18. Okay, that completes the modifications for this board. Now we'll go on to 371. For this board, because these LEDs originally only one would be on at a time, and so there was only enough voltage to run one of them. However, with the Kiwisix board, we could have more than one of those on at a time because it's going to indicate new functionality that it didn't already have. As a result, we have to change these jumpers and resistors in here so that we can give it that functionality. So we need to remove this resistor and these 3 jumpers. So that's R14, J12, 13, and 16. We're going to pull those out. All right, so we can pull those out. Here's R14. The 470 ohm resistor that we pulled out previously, which is this one here, and we know it's 470 because yellow is 4, orange is, no, that's not right. That's not a 470. What the heck? All right, so the instructions that it came with in here says that you're supposed to take the original 470K resistor that was R16 and use it here that we took off the other board. However, looking at this that I pulled off, this was R16. It is not 470, it is 430K. So, you know what? I think it's probably going to be fine. It's close enough. I could put a 470K that I have, but I think this is probably going to be all right. So 470 goes into where J12 was. So we'll put this resistor in where this jumper used to be. We put a jumper in where R14 used to be. All right, and then for the remaining two resistor slots where the jumpers used to be, they supply us with new resistors to go in there, and they gave us 3. I don't know why they gave us 3, but what are they? They are yellow, purple, brown, it looks like, so that would be 470 ohms. So we'll put those into where these jumpers used to be. So as you will realize when you get to episode 4 of this series, that one of the LEDs in the bank select switches, the A LED, wasn't working. And when I investigated further, I realized that when I was looking at the instructions, they were a little bit unclear, and it was I thought it was saying reuse the old resistor that I had removed from the previous step and use it in here. And that's why I was confused when it was saying 470, but in fact what I was reading was a 430K, which didn't make sense at the time. And you can see I'm not quite in the video. I'm like, why is this a 430K that doesn't make sense? I should have listened to my gut. It was wrong. The correct, once I had a look at the actual schematic and I could see how these are actually laid out, I realized that what they are intending you to do was to replace the first one with the jumper, which I did, and then the 3 remaining jumpers should be replaced with the 3 resistors that they supplied. And in the video you see, hey, why do I have 3? I'm only using 2. I guess I just have an extra one. Duh. The reason why is because they intended to use all 3, not reuse the resistor from the previous step, which is what I thought the manual was actually saying, but I interpreted it incorrectly. So, ignore where you see me putting that other resistor in here. Just put the supplied resistors in all 3 of those spots and you'll be good. All right, so that's the end of the modifications for these boards for the Kiwisix upgrade. A few passes with the spray clean and polish and a cotton towel. Man, look at that. Just gleaming, shiny, looks like brand new. Beautiful. Better than new. So now that we've finished all the modifications to these boards, we've swapped the switches, we've cleaned all the controls, we can now mount them back into the control panel. I think that's where we'll leave things off for this episode. We got the front panel taken apart, modified, fixed, cleaned, put back together. Looks beautiful. Looks like new, really. It's just, I'm so pleased with how this has come out. Obviously, it'll need one more touch-up, get all my greasy fingerprints off it. We've got the Keybed rebuilt, and all we have left to do is the integration of the Kiwisix connections to the front panel here, and then our special ground runs where we connect all the special grounds to the various parts in the synth. And then lastly, building that new power supply into the Polysix. We do also need to fit this into the case. I think we'll leave that until the next episode. That's probably the next thing we need to do, because in order to connect everything together, it really needs to be in the case. So this will be merging back with the case very soon. Thank you for following along with my adventure here. I hope you really appreciate all the work that's going on here into this beautiful synthesizer. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. I know I've got quite a few comments from people who either have a Polysix and want to do this or have done it, and it's amazing that something that I can do here to this synthesizer can empower so many other people to do the same thing to theirs and get so many of these old synthesizers back up and running again. I think that's just fabulous thing, and it just makes all of this worthwhile. If you do like what you saw here today, please click like, subscribe to the little bell. It gets you notification whenever we post one of these new videos, and it really, really helps us out. Thanks for watching.